All right, welcome to another episode of the PortraitMode podcast. My name is Jake Carr. I am a photographer, speaker, and aspiring author. And today I get the opportunity, beautiful downtown Chicago. It's -5 degrees, and my guest left 73-degree weather to come up here for a very important event to spend some time in Chicago. But my guest today, she is an author, a keynote speaker, an aspiring photographer that I just learned, and also a former police chief, which brought her through a number of crazy things and helped her learn how to lead people. She has a great leadership podcast, and she does an amazing keynote speech. Welcome, Kristen ZIman.
Thank you so much for having me, Jake, or I should say welcome to my abode here in Chicago.
Absolutely beautiful. We are on the 42nd floor. We are overlooking downtown Chicago and Lake Michigan, which is pretty much frozen over at the time of the recording here. But we are nice and warm in her condo in her humble abode here in Chicago. So, Kristen, welcome to the show. Kristen and I met at a keynote talk that you were doing. Mm-hmm. I was photographing it, and when Kristen was speaking, I'd never seen that group. I've been there for several years. Never seen them so engaged in the content that you were presenting. And once you got them engaged with the content and the story you were telling, you did a great job of transitioning to points that worked for their industry. So I think that was amazing. I just had never seen a keynote speaker like that. So we connected, we texted, I sent her the pictures, and so just excited to have some time to visit with you. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your history.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to pull that thread for just a second. This is like life, right? And to keep, in the theme of what you do in photography, it's like the snapshot that happened, right? Where I was speaking and you just happened to be there taking photos and, reached out to me and, then you and I connected. And I just think the universe is so cool like that. It's just like this one moment in time that's a snapshot and we get to freeze that. So yes, back to the background. I am born and raised in Aurora, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, second largest city. And for my whole life, I wanted to be a cop since I was a zygote. My father before me was a police officer, and there was never anything that enticed me as much as becoming a police officer. And I ended up doing that in my hometown. And I spent 30 years as a police officer in Aurora, and I worked my way up through the ranks. I became the police chief there, which is a dream come true. And also, if you would have told me in 1991 when I started at the police department that I would become the chief, I would have absolutely laughed at you. I really would have. There were no females in rank, so I had no vision of aspirations because I just didn't see that as a possibility. So the proudest moment of my life was becoming the chief of my hometown, and things were going swimmingly. In the first few years of my tenure, we were taking some systems and processes that were broken and trying to fix them, trying to fix the culture of policing. And then the worst possible thing that could have happened, and we had a mass shooting in my city in 2019. 5 people were killed and 5 of my officers were shot. And then after that, we had the pandemic. And then after that, we had the aftermath of George Floyd and civil unrest. So I spent 3 years, I should say, of my 6-year tenure in crisis mode. And so a good leader never leaves in the middle of a crisis. So I waited for the dust to settle and I got the hell out of there. And that's how you found me, is then after policing, I wrote a book to chronicle some of the events that happened in my career and in my life about leadership. And I started speaking, and I didn't plan on doing that, but it's evolved into a really cool thing I get to do. So that's where I am today.
Fantastic. Well, I believe it was your calling. I think being a police officer was your calling, being the police chief, to guide them through that moment. But definitely when you're on stage, your presence that you have, you were kind of born to be a speaker. You just didn't realize it.
I guess I didn't, and that is a great compliment, and I really appreciate that.
But as we spoke earlier, you cut your teeth on speaking to police officers. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about like the body language when you're up there. How do you read the crowd? How do you break people down? How do you pay attention to things when you're up there on stage?
Yeah, so this was a big learning curve for me. So people always ask me, how did you become a public speaker? How did you get good at it? And I love the compliment, thank you that I got good at it. Public speaking started when I was a young cop. because I was in the community-oriented policing unit, and I would have to go into neighborhoods and I would have to listen to all of the complaints of angry citizens. And in the 90s, that was a time of heightened crime. So people were pissed off, and I would have to kind of navigate the crowds. And then as I moved up through the ranks, it just becomes a natural thing that you do. You address your roll call. So it's a bunch of cops, right? And then I became a lieutenant, and then I started speaking at conferences. Well, then I became the chief, and it's just natural. I have to take the podium when something bad happens, typically, or even when something good happens. And so I learned how to speak throughout the years. It didn't just happen overnight, right? And I tell people that it's a muscle that you have to continue to use, and it's all about repetition. But to your question is, I became very astute in noticing the crowd. And when my police officers, even as I was a sergeant addressing officers, I could see if they were disengaged. So I knew that I had to say something interesting to get them back to me. So I learned that skill throughout the years, and cops are the hardest to bring in because they're naturally suspicious, like, do you have credibility? Who are you to come up here and speak to me, right? We're very fickle that way. So I learned to watch body language in the audience. Even from the stage, I can zone in on, certain groups. I can tell when people put their head down, start to go into their phone, and then I know I got to switch gears and I've got to bring them back. So since cops are the hardest, as I learned to bring them into the content, and kind of what you said is every audience, they're there. Listen, my job is a service to others, where I'm trying to get the audience to take something from it. I'm not there to talk about me. I'm there to talk about them. And so I study the industry before I go into it. And I learn about what their challenges are. And so I try to tailor everything to that person sitting in the audience. And that is the key to public speaking. You are literally just a vessel. And it's, if they leave there thinking, did I think differently? Did I learn something? Am I going to change something? Then that is the key.
Absolutely. I think you did, again, an amazing job of that. And just making it about them, I think that's the important thing. Whether you're speaking or even as a photographer, I think a lot of photographers, they post things and they make it about them. They make it about, oh, look at this cool shot that I took.
Yeah.
And I think through our business, what we've learned, and through the PortraitMode, like, it's about you. And we came into your place. Okay, this is your place. And I told you beforehand we're going to take a portrait. But be you. It doesn't have to be the sports go Kristen that's gonna trying to give a speech. It's about you, and you as a person, as a mom, as a human being, as a partner, all of these things that you are. And I think that's the importance of the portrait mode. Is it's not just one thing. It's not just who you're trying to be in your career or whatever. It's about who you are as a genuine human being. And I think when you make it, as a photographer, for me, when I go in and I make it about the other person and listen and find out what they want to be like. Just same with the athletes. I've got like 15 seconds to photograph, a 5-year-old wrestler. I've been wrestling. It's wrestling all week. It's been crazy. It's chaos. But you say, hey, I really like your shoes, or I really like your shirt, or point out something about their hair. They got, if they took time to spike the hair, you're going to take a little bit of extra time with that kid and mention something about it, because it's important. So I think there's a lot of congruency between photography and speaking. Like, you have to observe the other people to kind of guide you where you're going.
1000%. And listen, I want your head to get big here, because that's my intent. I hired a photographer for that event. And so I had a photographer there, and you and I, of course, didn't know each other. You weren't there to photograph me. You were there for the conference. And you, out of the kindness of your heart, just shot me a couple of photos that you had taken. And yours blew the other photographer out of the water. And here's why. Because it's hard to explain. And I guess that's why I love imposter syndrome, when people are like, wow, I have, all I did was take a picture. But no, you didn't just take a picture. You captured something, and it was me on stage, and then an audience reaction. And I remember looking at these pictures and thinking, you captured it perfectly. And that is such a gift. And not a lot of people can do that. When you say aspiring photographer, I am a wannabe and I don't know how to do that. And so what you do is masterful, and you might think, oh no, it's just really easy, but that's what an audience is all about too, is, I'm there to pull out of them a struggle, a challenge, and to meet that moment with them. And it's an act of service, just like what you do.
So I read something this week, and I'll have to forward it to you, by the author Mark Manson, who's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which I think he put the F word in his books for sold, but they're really good books. But I have not seen a newsletter come through from him in a long time. And this thing came through right before I was doing another podcast, and it talked exactly about the gift and how the hardest thing for us to realize sometimes is to recognize our own gifts when we have them, because they come so easy to them, and we don't think they're such a big deal until we get out and we see, or somebody else, we sit down with you and I tell you, hey, you're an amazing speaker. You're an amazing photographer. Until you see it through other eyes. One of the ways that I think the portrait mode happens, and you just told a story recently on your podcast about human transference. It's an amazing thing, and you had a situation where a doctor went way above and beyond, and I believe that doctor, that was their gift, and they were just doing what they thought was the right thing, but to you, from experience, it was human transference, and it was like this person went above and beyond.
Yeah.
One of the things I think the portrait mode, and why you put a portrait on the wall, and why I think you should have a current portrait on the wall, is because before you can have this human transference, you have to have some self-transference. And a lot of times we don't have that. Like, we are so, especially if we're aspiring to do something, you as a photographer, you beat yourself up 10 times since I've been here about becoming a photographer, right? Your internal voice is telling you, you can't do this. This is too hard. This is too hard. This is too hard. And until somebody else says, no, this is easy, and shows you a little bit of evidence and shows you how simple it can be, that kind of thing. That's what I think your portrait does is because you need to look at your portrait and go, oh yeah, I can do this. Oh, I do need to be nice to myself. Oh, you do need to go work out today because it's going to help you be better. You do need to go do the cold plunge. You do need to, make that trip to -5 degrees because to this event, because that's the right thing to do. So sometimes in order for us to have this human transference, we have to have self-transference first, and be comfortable with who we are, comfortable driving in the city, going to to somebody's apartment, condo, and filling the pocket, and you have to be comfortable with me. Maybe you did a background check with your police thing.
Yeah, I've got your whole file, your background check.
But I think that has to happen. You have to be confident with yourself before you can start going above and beyond.
Yeah, you said something, that's the word I was actually just going to pull from that, is everything that you have just described is confidence. And I love the notion of confidence. And when people say, yeah, I'm just not a very confident person, or, I never have been. And that's the beauty of it, is that confidence is something that is built, and it's built through competency. It is built through the way that you speak to yourself. And you heard me, I suck as a photographer. And you're like, wait, but you're getting better. And I had to take my own advice, but it's also the promises you keep to yourself. It's that thing that you just started doing. You said, I bought a cold plunge and I'm doing it. And everything inside you that morning before you get into that cold plunge tells you, I'm not going to do it. It's going to suck so bad. And you'll talk yourself out of it. But you made the promise to do it because you know that the version of you, Jake, before you go into it, that the version of you after you get out is better. And so it's this promise that you keep to yourself, and it's for your future self, knowing that it's going to be better for you.
Yeah, it's so easy I've been on the stage a little bit. It's so easy to give advice. It is so much harder to live it. And I was listening to one of your podcasts, and I think Ted talked to you, and Ted and Sylvia talked about it. It's easy for us to stand on stage and tell you what to do, and we know what to do.
Yeah.
We've read enough things, we know what to do, but sometimes just getting to do it. For me, it's a writing plan. I know that I want to write a book. I know that it's up here. It's just a matter of, okay, how do I carve out that time and go, okay, for the next hour, nobody's going to bother me, and I'm going to put this down.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put this on paper so that it can become reality. And the crazy thing is, if you were doing that for somebody else, if you asked me to do something, boom, it would be done. But when it has to come for yourself, when you have to do it for yourself, sometimes you have to treat yourself as your own client, if you will, so that you make yourself a priority and you put it together.
Yeah, that is brilliantly put. The promises that you keep to yourself. And like you said, it's easy to have a goal. It's so easy. I want to become healthy. I want to lose weight. I want to write a book. that's a great goal. But if you don't set any systems and processes in place for you to write those 600 to 800 words every day, even if they suck and you delete it all, you have to stare at that blinking cursor sometimes, and you already are a writer. It's also about identity. And this is Michael Easter's work about from Atomic Habits, is that identity matters. Is when you can say to yourself, I am a writer, then that makes it easier for you to go sit in front of that cursor and to do it every single day. I am a photographer, and that makes it easy. Now, you've got to get better, and that's the repetition, and then the confidence is built through competency.
Yeah, I've shot that event 13, 14 times. I've shot speakers on stage, so like it comes natural, and you look for those angles, you look for that, just like you've given those talks and you've done your research, and so like that repetition over, it's just like an athlete. Like you're not going to get better unless you practice, unless you put the effort in, unless you put the work in.
Yeah, for sure. And it's no different than your photography. And I love what you said about, capturing the person, the real person. Is like everybody's so polished on, social media and all the filters and all of these things that we do that are so fake. And, and when you said to me, it's like, hey, I just want to capture, you and just, your personality and, wear something that feels natural to you. It's like, that's what we need more of, is just kind of our natural imperfections.
And I'm not trying to be mean, but as a photographer, I take, the camera shoot 30 frames per second. If I sent you 10 pictures, there were probably 100 that will wait. But especially with speaking, because you're like, your eye,
exactly.
So part of a great photographer is like knowing what to select. Just like writing, when you put out your newsletters, like you may have 15 thoughts, but there's 5 that really connect and jive together to work to do that. So I think selecting and editing, whether you're creative, whether you're a writer, whatever, selecting and editing is such a key to what you do. I see so many photographers and they'll just blast like 800 pictures on Facebook. Well, I can't connect with 800 pictures, but I can connect with 8 where there's 2 eyes and the ball and conflict and that kind of thing, or beautiful sunsets or whatever. Like there has to be something in it, but less is more when it comes to writing, when it comes to creative things.
Actually, yeah, you hit on something there that I think is really important, is that you have to take 100 pictures to get the 10 that are good. That is really interesting, because all people see are the 10 perfect pictures. And having written a book, you have not seen the shit that that my editor said, this is boring, and in the red line where I'm like, wait, I love that story. They're like, no, I fell asleep during it. I'm like, oh, okay. But you don't see that. You see the polished version, and that's kind of what we see also online too. And nobody sees the behind the scene process where you work really hard to get those 10 pictures. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the key to social media. Like social media is like you're comparing your last 24 hours to somebody's best 24 seconds or whatever it is. It's impossible. And like you scroll, and I do it all the time. Like, it'll be winter and I'll be like, okay, we're on a vacation with family, but I'll be scrolling through. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this photographer. No, stop.
Yeah.
Throw the phone across the room and and be present and be there. What are some of the things, like, what are some of your tips? And I don't know if you talk about it, but like, what do you do to be present? And you've got an afternoon, a cool afternoon planned here. Like, what do you do, like when you're with family, when you're with your partner, when you're what are some tricks?
Yeah, so that's actually the part of my life that I'm really bad at, is being present. And here's why: because I have this crazy. I would call it a flaw. It's my greatest strength, but my greatest flaw, and that is I'm constantly thinking about the next thing. It's why I bought all that photography gear, because I'm like, oh, I want to be a photographer and I want to learn how to do it, and as a hobbyist, and I'm constantly thinking about the next thing, and especially my family. And I'm glad my wife isn't here, because she would say that I suck at that, of being in the moment, because I'm constantly thinking about, I just thought of a blog post that I want to go write. You just made me think about something, and then I will go and do that. And this is the work that I'm currently doing, and this is why that significant emotional event happened, from getting what I thought was a terminal diagnosis. And then it turns out, that wasn't true. So I thought I was going to die for 5 days. And I've come out of that going, this moment right here, right now is all that matters. All that matters is you and me sitting right here, sharing thoughts and ideas. And I'm not thinking about my next keynote that's next week. I'm not thinking about anything else but being here with you. And I think that's what that moment did, is at the end of your one wild and precious life, it's not going to matter how many keynotes. It's going to be the connections that you made along the way. And so so to answer your question, it's a conscious thought. I have to be present consciously. That means I have to put my phone away and not worry about my watch and going off. And I just have to sit here and concentrate and focus on you and me. And that's it. And it's my biggest challenge that I'm doing right now because my brain constantly goes.
And from being a police officer, like you've had to anticipate the next move. Like when you're in that situation, you're in that mass, you show your keynote goes through the events of that day. Like you have to try to be predicting the next move of that person, that crazy person on the other side, to cut them off at the pass. So like I think your brain has always been like, okay, how do we anticipate that? You talked the other day about patterns and like you're constantly observing things, but it's hard to like just draw back. Mm-hmm. I say you have to protect your attention to preserve your intentions. So
that's good.
You intended to do something yesterday. I love this. I probably say it on every podcast, but you intended to do something yesterday, but then your attention got pulled away. And a lot of times it's social media, unfortunately. Sometimes it's an emergency. Sometimes it's a health thing. Sometimes significant emotional event that pulls you away. But like if you can protect your attention in like simple things, like you talk about notifications or blocking off time or putting a do not disturb sign or whatever it is to preserve those intentions, you can do it. But you have to be intentional about being in the moment. You have to be intentional about working out, about cold plunge, about that. Like it is so hard about drinking your water, about making sure it's black coffee. Like it takes a lot of power for us to be intentional, but the more intentional you can get, the more you can train your brain to be intentional about things.
Yeah.
The better you're going to be, the happier your life's going to be.
Yeah.
Because you're in the moment. I get in trouble all the time for not being completely present in the moment because you're thinking about this business or that, or like you said,
a million things.
The waitress says something and you're like, I got to write that down because it's going to be in a podcast someday. It's like, you just think differently, I think, when you're writing or podcasting or whatever. So.
Yeah, and I think it could benefit all of us. And I'm sure anybody who's listening probably suffers from that affliction where they're like, I'm constantly going, I'm moving. And when the best ideas come, I don't know about you, but for me, when I'm just quiet, I've taken to, just staying quiet and listening to what the universe is trying to tell me in that moment.
All right, just that.
You were scared me, did it not record?
I know. I was like, I didn't see the thing moving. Yeah, it's good. I was like,
oh my God. Double check.
That's good.
That is
We have backup there.
That is pure panic.
I was like,
I know that feeling.
Sorry. I was like, let me just make sure.
Do what you gotta do.
Okay. All right. Good. Sorry to break the momentum there.
That's okay.
Okay. So you talked about significant emotional event, and you've had something recently. It was a health scare. So I was listening to you talk about it, and I wrote it down because I was like, now what did you call it? Significant what? Significant emotional event. SEE. So I think those significant, and I went through one that's not nearly as crazy as yours, but like it's a firing, it's a health scare, it's a transition, it's a divorce, it's a change, it's your kids leaving for college or getting employed, those kinds of things, these significant emotional events. And they just change the way you see things. How did that impact you? You don't have to go into details and that, but how did this recent, we talked a little bit about being present, but what are some of the other things that came from that?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that. A significant emotional event is unique to each of us, whatever that looks like for you. And you mentioned all of the big ones: divorce, losing a job, or transition, moving, all of those things. For me, it was a health scare. And, I like to think that we can learn from others, that we can listen to the wisdom from others with when people describe how it feels when your kids leave the house for the first time, and you can empathize with that, but you genuinely can't feel that until you feel it personally. And I've had people tell me that they, have a new lease on life because of something that happened or a new outlook. And people can tell you that, and the hope is that's true wisdom, that you can take someone else's experiences and apply it to yourself. But unfortunately, humans, we're not quick learners like that. We have to experience it ourselves. And so for me, that significant emotional event, there were 5 days where I was planning my funeral, 5 days that I believed and the doctors believed that I had pancreatic cancer in the worst possible place on my pancreas. And so fast forward 5 days, turns out I don't have cancer, but in those 5 days, I thought I was dying, right? So coming out of that significant emotional event not only changed the presence, as we talked about, but it also made me audit my life really, really quickly. When you think that you have a finite amount of time left, and funny, we all have a finite amount of time left, right? But we think we're invincible,
right.
and we don't really consider our death every day. But when you believe genuinely that you have terminal cancer and you are not long for this earth, you start to really put things into perspective. And I did an audit of my life and my relationships. And the way I would put it is this: is we spend so much time with energy vampires, just things that suck the energy out of our lives. And that is people and things and obligations. And I'm not suggesting that we have obligations that we of course have to adhere, but there are things in our lives that we know are draining us and that we know that we should be walking away from, people and things. And we don't do it because we try to stay out of the obligation and the expectations that society has on us. And when I left that hospital after them telling me after the 5th day, hey, just kidding, you're not gonna die, I remember thinking, okay, I have to take this lesson and this audit, and I am locked in. I am very clear about who and what is important, and the things that I say yes to, and more importantly, the things that I say no to now are the things that maybe aren't in alignment with my goals, or the people who bring me down, or the people who I've now realized are just so one-sided. You put so much into the emotional bank account and you get nothing in return from them. And I've had to audit, and I've had to have some very serious, conversations within my own head and say, this person is an energy vampire for me. And so that is what I've taken away from it. And man, the faster we can get to that in our lives, I think the better off we'll be.
That is very well said. And again, hopefully you don't have to have a significant emotional event, but as you said, until you feel it, until you're, as a military parent, until your kid goes and is deployed for the first time or goes to boot camp, until you feel that, you don't understand. I tell parents all the time, we were always in and out of the high school, I'm like, hey, those 4 years are going to go by really fast. And people used to tell us that too. We're like, are you crazy? Like, we're just drugging through and going from game to game and whatever. This is going to last forever. And like, it's done. And until you experience, it's like when you're, it's like for me, when my wife tells me something and, I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then my mom tells me and she's like, well, see, your mother told you and you listen to her, it's that kind of thing. Like until you get that, until you experience it for yourself. So, I'm going to leave with one final question. I know you've got a great day planned here, and, you can't wait to get out in the -5 degrees.
Can't wait.
But so, our friends at mpix.com, which is our only true sponsor for our podcast, they will provide us an 11x14 framed portrait. So I'll show you the options and let you pick those. So we shot that before we started the podcast. As a police officer, you were the chief of police. So chief of police and police departments are like one of the places where there's actually portraits on the wall. And you mentioned Michael Easter earlier, and you talked about the 2%. Michael Easter's podcast or his newsletter is called the 2%, because if there's an escalator and there's stairs, there's only about 2% of the people who will take the stairs instead of the escalator.
Yep.
95% of the time, if I don't have a big bag, I like to take the stairs. I listen to that too. I get stuck in my head. Like, okay, you're able body, you should do this. I would argue that there's probably about the same amount of people in this world that have a current portrait on the wall. Because they're a doctor, a lawyer, a CEO, a president, a leader. So, one, do you remember having your portrait on the wall as police chief? Do you remember anything that it made you feel, or was it just there?
That's such a great question. And I'll tell you, there's something, that I can't, it's hard for me to think about like a portrait without being, what I used to think about it being egotistical. It's like this thing of like, you have this portrait of yourself. It would never occur to me to put a portrait of myself on the wall. I more prefer to turn the camera outward and put portraits of other people on the wall. But what I recognize is the significance of a portrait and how it captures, if done correctly, if done behind the eye of someone like you, that can capture the essence of a human being, how important it is. My portrait on the wall of my police department, for me, wasn't so much about me, but it was about the uniform that I wore. It was the stars on my collar, and it was that American flag in the background that made me really lock into the fact that my job is to uphold the Constitution of the United States and democracy and law and order. And that portrait of me reminded me of the great responsibility that I behold to not only my city, to my police officers, to my community, to my state, and to the nation at large. And that made me sit up a little taller with that portrait. And I think that is what a good portrait does. It makes you really think about the responsibility that you have as the CEO, as the person, or even just anyone, in the world, and who you are in the world. And that's why I think portraits matter.
Thank you. That's amazing. And I think you pointed it out. Okay, so the portrait's there and it upholds the job, but imagine this portrait now, this new portrait of you in this new life, a significant emotional event. We came in, we take this portrait, put this portrait on the wall. It represents everything that you need to be to you. Because if you are not the best version of yourself, it's hard for you to be the best version for your partner, for your grandchildren, for your children, that kind of thing. It's why you get up and work out. It's why you do your push-up routine, those kinds of things. It's just that constant reminder. A lot of people say, well, hey, look in the mirror. Well, if I look in the mirror and I'm having a shitty day, I see a guy having a shitty day. I'm looking at it like that. And as far as like the egotistical part, I put that portrait up and go, okay, this isn't for you. Okay, it is for me to kind of like to ground myself and to look at that. And when I'm having that discouraging moment, when I'm having writer's block, when I can't figure out how to do this or get this done, stop and look and do that. And I think that's the key with other things too, like this poem. I brought you the Ripple poem. I could have easily just sent that to you and said, oh, I think you should read this or whatever. But the instant that you take something out of your phone and you print it, or like a book on a table or something on the walls, like it just takes it transfers into something different. I started replacing like sports memorabilia. Like I've got letters that my boys wrote me for Father's Day on boot camp. Those are the two most prized possessions. Like you couldn't, like if an autograph dealer or something, like you could never have those. Like those are priceless. And we put value on things, but then there's things like that of all of you that are priceless. And I think your current portrait, it's priceless to you. And if people, that 2% would actually do it, go find a photographer, go have it done, go sit for it and hang it on the wall, you would see some self-transference that happens. And I'll tell you, I would not be sitting here speaking to you. It would have been another speaker that I took pictures of and was excited about. I wouldn't be having this kind of in-depth conversation with someone if I hadn't done that and gotten the confidence from that to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I love what you said about, you brought me this beautiful framed, these words, the ripple effect and transference, how we impact other human beings every single day, even in just in passing, where it's like we're all just crashing into each other, and then that's kind of where being present comes in, is that we keep crashing into each other or passing each other. But when we really see people, and I think that's what you've made me change my paradigm about a portrait, because that's what it does. It allows you to really see someone. And then when you then transfer that to yourself and, having your own portrait, it just does something again, where you sit up a little taller and you think, I matter in this world and the things that I do matter. And so, it's a cool thing to have.
Absolutely. Well, where can people learn more about you? Where can we find out, like if someone wants to book you as a speaker, if someone wants to follow you on social media? I will tell you, your newsletter is like, I get a lot of newsletters and stuff, but like when I see yours come across, I'm like, I have to stop what I'm doing and I have to read it because I know it's going to be something relevant or something just impactful. And you know, I think the very first one I got was about Thanksgiving. I think I was in tears because you were talking about somebody being on deployment, and we had that same connection. Yeah. So it's definitely, the newsletter is amazing. You have a Hollow Bunny podcast, so just tell us where people can find you.
Sure, you just go to KristenZIman.com. That's it, KristenZIman.com. It's got the links to you can sign up for my newsletter, book me as a speaker. I'm also a coach, an executive coach, and I do consulting, and the blog is there. Everything is, the whole ecosystem is at KristenZIman.com, and I'm going to put your picture that you took of me on that too, so people can see your work.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you. Well, thank you for the time. Thank you for opening up your home. It's Saturday morning. Big day planned, but I really appreciate this. This has been awesome.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Jake. Appreciate it.